For over a year now, one of the greatest mysteries in all of Deltarune has been Des Holiday. This character was only briefly mentioned in Chapter 1, but Chapter 2 makes it clear that there's a ton of mystery surrounding Des and her disappearance. To briefly recap what we know, Des Holiday is Noelle's older sister, who, for some reason or another, went missing sometime in the past. But that's it. For the longest time, we didn't really know anything else about Des, and there didn't seem to be any solid theories we could make with this information. Everything I saw trying to figure out what happened to Des was more conjecture than anything else, and until just recently, I thought this was as far as the mystery went. However, just recently, the Spamton Sweepstakes event gave us a lot of new lore insights on the world of Deltarune, even including some new details about Des. So, with this new information combined with what we know from chapters 1 and 2, I was finally able to come up with a convincing explanation of what happened to the Holiday family's eldest daughter. But the one thing I can't explain is why only 10% of you guys are subscribed. I mean, come on, you don't want to be a part of the stinky 90% who aren't subscribed, right? So, be a big guy and join the 10%. But with that out of the way, let's really dive into the mystery behind Des Holiday. To be honest, my initial thoughts based on the way characters talked about Des was that she was dead. Heck, even the Deltarune wiki implies that Des being dead is just as likely a possibility as her being missing. Whenever Noelle talks about Des, it's in a somber way, and during the spelling bee, she gets so choked up on spelling the word December that she can't even begin to spell it and collapses to the ground. However, while certain dialogue throughout Chapter 2 can certainly lead some to the conclusion that Des is dead, I think it's much more likely that Des is just missing or lost, considering what we now know from the Spamton Sweepstakes. During the Spamton Sweepstakes, there was a page that popped up with the URL deltarune.com/des, with a picture of a red guitar. When you click the guitar, a guitar cover of Lost Girl will play, specifically called findher.mp3. All this strongly implies that Des is just missing and not deceased, and that a major plot point in a future chapter may involve finding her. Sure, she could be missing and dead, but with the file name of the song being Find Her, I think it's much more likely that she's still alive and we'll find her in a later part of the game. But if she is still alive, then where could she have disappeared to? In the depths of Deltarune's code, there has been a voice calling out from the darkness ever since Chapter 1. These lines of text say things like, "Is anybody out there? Can anybody hear me?" And, "It's dark. It's so dark here." It paints the picture of someone who is lost or trapped in some kind of dark abyss, with nobody around to answer their calls for help. It also seems to be linked back to Gaster, since they repeat and emphasize how dark their surroundings are, very similarly to Gaster's infamous "dark, darker, yet darker" line. This person even seems to bleed through Spamton's dialogue in Chapter 2 during actual gameplay. When he goes static for a brief moment in his shop, the line, "Can anyone hear me? Help," appears. This seems like it's a pretty important part of the lore with all the connections to Gaster, but there doesn't seem to be any common consensus or likely candidate for who is speaking here. From what I've seen online, there hasn't been a ton of community discussion regarding this either, besides people just talking about how it's weird and probably has something to do with Gaster. It makes sense. For a while, there wasn't much to go off here, and not many candidates for who this voice is made all too much sense. However, with what we have discussed and know now, is it possible that this voice has actually been Des the whole time? When I first thought about it as an actual possibility, I kinda disregarded it as a silly passing thought that didn't have much to back it up. Sure, Des and the voice in the void are both lost in some way, but that was really all the evidence I could think of. That was until just recently. I was a part of a Deltarune podcast with other Deltarune content creators discussing the lore of the game, during which Dort said this about why Chris stopped playing the piano when Noelle walked in.
People get hung up on them getting very still, but she specifically says, like, they were remembering something, and if Chris knew something about what happened to Des, that could be why, and, like, they try to have fun and hang out with Noelle, but then they remember something about her sister, and they're really not good with words, and so they go to the piano as a way to just channel what they're feeling and just get that out. I could see that being what's going on.
Yeah, that's possible.
I'll be honest, at the time, the idea that Chris had anything to do with Des's disappearance seemed pretty outlandish to me. Chris just stopped playing the piano because they were embarrassed by Noelle watching them, right? This is when it clicked for me, because little did I know that there is a connection between Chris and the person who's lost in the void. Remember when I said that Spamton glitches out and the voice talks through him for a brief moment? Well, in response to that, Spamton says that he didn't hear anyone talking, but that it sounded like they were talking to you. Given the fact that during this scene, the only people present are Spamton and Chris, the you here definitely refers to Chris. And since it's Spamton talking and not the narrator, it rules out any possibility that Spamton is talking about the player here. The fact that the voice is calling out to Chris specifically is also a weird detail to throw in as well. Spamton could have just said something like, "Huh, that was weird," or something along those lines, but the game goes out of its way to say that the voice's pleas for help were directed at Chris specifically. There's even more evidence that supports the theory that the person lost in the darkness is Des though. When you give items like weapons and armor to party members, even if they can't necessarily use the item, they'll have a specific reaction for each one. One of the items that Spamton can turn into when he's defeated is the puppet scarf, and although you can't normally see it in-game, Noelle's reaction is that it feels like guitar strings. Nobody really thought much of this before, but with the Spamton sweepstakes revealing that the guitar cover of Lost Girl is representative of Des, it's crystal clear now that there's some sort of connection here between Des and Spamton. I think it's supposed to imply a similarity between both of their situations, and it could be the fact that they both lack freedom. As we know, Spamton and Jevil both realize they are trapped in some way, and they both went insane from their desire for freedom. If Des really is trapped somewhere in a dark abyss with no hope of getting out, then she has just as little freedom as the secret bosses do. With all this information put together, I think there's actually a compelling case for Des and this person lost in the abyss being the same person. It would make sense if Chris were somehow involved or had witnessed Des's disappearance in some way. Chris, Azriel, Noelle, and Des did hang out a lot during their childhood, and Chris definitely knows how important Des is to Noelle. If they knew something about what happened to her and vented that guilt or anxiety through the piano, then it would only make sense that they would immediately stop whenever Noelle walked in. Even if Chris doesn't have anything to do with Des's disappearance itself, the fact that the voice was talking to Chris and not Spamton at least implies that the voice knows Chris and is calling out for some help from a friend. And as someone who has gone missing and is one of Chris's few friends, Des sure seems to fit this bill pretty well. What exactly Chris's part in this whole situation really is remains unclear, but I think it is safe to say that Des Holiday has somehow gotten lost in the darkness. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching! As mentioned earlier, this topic isn't really talked about a lot, so I'm curious about what you all have to say about it in the comments. And if you liked the video, then make sure to subscribe. I make Deltarune content a lot on this channel, so I'll make it worth your time. And if you really like this video, then the next video essay of mine is already up on my channel on Patreon. For $5 a month, you can see the next video essay from this channel a whole week early, so go check it out in the description. With that all being said though, thank you all for watching, and I hope you have a great day.